In this video, I will rank beliefs on a tier list based on how self-destructive they are. The better the belief is for your mental health, the lower it will go on the tier list. And the more self-destructive the belief is, the higher it will go. And I can hear you asking, why are you rating beliefs based on health? It shouldn't really matter if a belief makes me healthy or not. What matters is the truth. And I always thought that everybody thinks like this too, but most humans don't really care about truth. What we care about is our comfort and survival. And questioning our own beliefs can be mentally destabilizing. Since I was a kid, I was existentially obsessed. I needed to understand what reality really is. Like, I needed to know why anything exists at all. What is truth? So while growing up, I held all types of beliefs and got stuck in many unhealthy mindsets. But while growing older, after a lot of self-destruction, I finally found the truth that I was looking for. And I want to share this now through this tier list. So let's find out which beliefs are the most self-destructive, and if truth is really meant to make us happy. Optimism. Optimism is the belief that good future outcomes are possible or even more likely to happen than negative ones. It is characterized by a positive expectation about the future and a bias towards a more pleasant perspective on things. Optimism was the reason why I stayed in a toxic relationship for years. Despite seeing that the same fights were repeating over and over again, nothing really was changing. The things were only getting worse and the fights were becoming more frequent. I hoped that if I just forgot all the bad, that the future would be fine. Or maybe even that the future would never even come. This was optimism. But it was also delusional. I was in denial not just about my relationship, but about my entire lifestyle that was toxic. Of course, optimism is great if it motivates you to work for a vision towards the future, but it is awful if it makes you stay in toxic situations. Therefore, I want to put optimism in D tier. Toxic optimism is also what caused me to fall into the trap of hedonism. Hedonism is the belief that pleasure and the avoidance of pain is the main goal of life. Hedonists want to minimize suffering by pursuing their desires without any concern for the long-term consequences. Why do you think everybody is so anxious and depressed nowadays? We have chosen short-term pleasures over long-term passion for life. In my case, my plan was to just keep smoking weed and playing video games and enjoy an endless amount of porn and sex. And I thought that in this way I could escape my existential fear somehow. But then I learned that life is extremely counterintuitive. When I started to engage more with my own pain and not try to escape from it through pleasure, I started to feel life deeper overall. Then I found what I really wanted out of my life. And this only worked because I learned how to restrain my short-term desires. The future is there and it's coming for you. You choose if you want to deny this with easy pleasures or if you want to confront your future head on. But hey, at least hedonism makes you feel amazing in the short term. So A tier for hedonism. Hedonism is the spiritual disease that fuels our consumer materialist society. Consumer materialism is the belief that material pursuits like money, sex and cars will ultimately lead to happiness. I heard a story from a psychiatrist who helped out two people with depression. One guy was at a prison, trapped there for 5 years, and the other guy was a multi-millionaire living in a $10 million mansion. But both people described the exact same feeling of emptiness. Because how they felt had nothing to do with what they owned. Of course, financial security is extremely important. However, beyond that, money really is just another tool. People think that if they have more stuff, that they somehow are worth more. If you think that, I think you're really screwed, because in life everything's just borrowed. Time will take everything from you, and clinging to impermanent objects or status and fame is a guaranteed disaster. But society doesn't want you to appreciate what you have, because if you are satisfied with what you already own, then how are you supposed to spend more money? With gratitude, our entire system breaks apart. To be more clear, I'm not an anti-capitalist, nor do I believe that making money is in itself evil. Striving for money as a form of self-empowerment is great. I also think that luxury items have a time and place. I, for example, want to grow my wealth for my family and friends. It's just that the level at which we indulge in this superficial materialism on a global scale is like a godlike level of self-destruction. We destroy ourselves and take the planet with us. So A tier for consumer materialism. Maybe we deserve everything bad that is coming to us. Karma. The belief that the intentions behind our actions shape our future. It highlights personal responsibility and the notion that our actions have consequences. If you've hurt others, you might also think that maybe you deserve to live a miserable life And maybe humanity deserves to collapse and die because we have been so evil. So it has some self-destructive capabilities if you just tell yourself that you deserve to suffer. In the original Hindu text, karma was never really about moral justice. Karma was just a word they used for cause and effect before it was like a thing in science. So the laws of physics, DNA and culture are like a more scientific framing of how karma works. But as a moral attitude, it's just more the idea of if you smile at somebody, it is likely that you receive a smile back. So it's not very self-destructive. A measured detail for karma, I think. The problem also with karma is that from the individual's perspective, it often looks unfair. If I got bad RNG in life, then why do I deserve to suffer? This is the central frustration of the black pill. The black pill believes that physical attractiveness is the key factor for dating and relationship success, and that attractiveness is mostly determined by your genetics. The idea is that you are either born attractive or you're not. As harsh as it is to say, some people will die sad and alone. But if you believe that you will be one of them, then you just made this future 100,000 times more likely to happen. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you are tall and have a symmetric looking face, people treat you better. Many people in these black pill communities get bothered by attractive looking people who deny this. Looks are important. That's completely fair. Let's acknowledge that. But black pillars don't get beyond that. Because, of course, looks are not the only thing that matter. If you actually talk to any woman in real life, this becomes rather obvious. But if black pillars saw this, then they would actually have to go out of their comfort zone and improve as men. And the entire belief structure is made so that they don't have to do that. They want to cower in their own sadness and misery, so they don't even have to try. This belief deserves a spot on S tier for how it preys on man's cowardness. But I do empathize with the black pill. At the end, what men really desire is not about sex. It's about the human longing for connection and intimacy, to not feel alone on this crazy fucking planet. This longing is what the red pill has capitalized on. The Red Pill is a cultural online movement that embraces conservative gender dynamics, emphasizing the importance of status, money and looks for dating success. Red Pillers believe that these are attributes men can and should develop. Okay, now we're getting cultural and controversial. Facts first, okay? This is a fact-based channel. The Red Pill is correct about many male-to-female relationship dynamics. Many of you, whoever's watching this, just want to deny this. Men tend to be more fulfilled when they are more dominant in the relationship. Women tend to be happier in more submissive roles. Turns out that thousands of years of genetical and cultural conditioning don't suddenly disappear. Don't forget that we are monkeys that put on some clothes and now we feel like we are beyond nature. We are not. You want to be assertive and self-reliant as a man. Being clingy is weakness. And weakness is unattractive. The red pill at least acknowledges that and motivates young men to level themselves up. But then they can't help themselves and promote all of the superficial traps of materialism and hedonism. Like, all of this red pill advice comes like with a huge spiritual disease of superficiality. Or have you ever seen a red pill podcast where they talk about how to be more emotionally vulnerable with your partner or how to have a loving and caring relationship? Of course not. Instead, being high value means bragging about how many women you have slept with or how many Bugattis you own. People who are secure about themselves don't need to flex about how many people they fuck. And the red pill has made talking shit about women into its own genre. Like, it's an entire online economy now. Channels who just talk about, like, the entire point of the channels are to talk about how women are just dumb whores. It's like some weird frustration that men have internally about like modern society that gets projected over to women. My advice, just take the bits and truths from all the pills. You can learn almost something from anybody. You don't need to lock yourself into one ideology or one community. Be here for the red pill. You have probably been skeptical about the things that I have to say in this video, so I want to make an important meta note here about myself. Skepticism. Skepticism is the act of doubting truth claims, or believing that certainty in knowledge is impossible. Am I a woke leftist, or am I an alt-right fascist? Am I a delusional Christian, or a soulless atheist? What I say is like half the message, because if you know where I stand politically, or if I believe in God or not, literally the way you receive every word that I say suddenly changes. Being skeptical is what causes all of these belief bubbles. And if you know to which bubble I belong, you can immediately discredit everything I have to say, right? You don't need to think or critically analyze what I have to say anymore. It makes it much easier for you. But of course, skepticism is extremely important, so you don't fall into bad belief systems. You don't want these bad belief systems to stick. You want to be skeptical, but you especially want to be skeptical of yourself. Everybody ends up saying that the others are not skeptical enough, and you are really the real skeptic, and you questioned everything till the end and you found the actual truth. And then you end up believing that the earth is flat. And don't think that you are like kind of invulnerable to all of these like traps the mind plays on you. You're not. We all prefer like our little comfort bubbles than to face like new ideas. It's hard for us because it's destabilizing. There needs to be a balance for open-mindedness. Even if people don't align with your political beliefs, you can learn something from them. Maturity is the ability to be skeptical of your own mind. C tier for skepticism. But I know, most are arrogant. Most people won't do this. People put other people into boxes, and I don't think this will change. Pessimism. Pessimism is the belief that things are more likely to go wrong than right. It's the tendency of seeing the negative aspect of a situation. If you don't expect too much, you won't get disappointed. And the black pill has mastered this. Negativity also just grabs our attention way more. I could have framed this video as how to have better belief systems, but even I would find this more boring. I'd rather point out all of the belief systems that are bad, and then I will let all of these bad belief systems compete with each other to find out which one is the worst. Now that's the YouTube video I want to watch. But pessimism at its core is really just fear towards the future. It makes a lot less room for solution and makes failure just so much more likely. It's like a limiting belief with really no real advantage. A tier for pessimism. But I think there's room for like a type of pessimism that helps you to be more realistic towards human nature. Cynicism. Cynicism is a distrustful attitude towards humans' intentions and sincerity, often accompanied by a belief that people are motivated only by self-interest. With a healthy dose of cynicism, you won't get taken advantage of. Humans aren't exactly the most trustworthy species. We are like little devils. We care more about our own survival and the survival of our tribe primarily. But if your cynicism consumes you, and you can't open up to anybody, then you're in for a very sad and lonely life. Be compassionate, but also remain realistic. C tier for cynicism. If the cynicism spirals out of control, it will eventually level up to misanthropy. Misanthropy is a deep dislike or hatred of human beings, often focusing on their flaws. Misanthropes believe that these flaws are inherent in most or all human beings and therefore cannot be corrected. If you spend enough time on 4chan or Twitter, misanthropy is a very likely outcome. The bias towards the negative that I just talked about before makes it just so easy to look at only the worst of the human species, because we humans are capable to do some awful things to each other. But the complete picture is that humans are the worst and the best thing on this planet. And misanthropy only focuses on the worst. Misanthropy is like a virus of self-hatred, and it spreads especially well online. I think a lot of people are much more misanthropic than they are aware of. If you feel isolated and alone, you might want to check on that. This self-hating belief deserves a spot on S tier. But I too sometimes wonder if humanity was a mistake and we maybe should stop creating more of us. Anti-natalism. Anti-natalists consider coming into existence as bad or deem making more babies as immoral. Anti-natalists thus argue that humans should stop having children. The idea is that we experience more pain and pleasure in life, and there's not really a way to ask children if they want to come into existence. So then the idea becomes that we should stop having children altogether. Most people I talk to find this idea extremely depressing. But to be honest, I find it very hard to look at the current world and say, yeah, you know what? More humans, that would be the solution. I think also this is why Thanos was such an apathetic character, despite wanting to kill off like half the universe. So maybe there is a balance here that we are missing. But anti-natalism isn't really about making less of us, but just completely stopping this humanity project. But nowadays I do believe that if you want to have children, it's just really a personal choice. Being a parent is insane. Like the amount of responsibility you have, you want to just be really in tune with that. Like what it really means to live an entire life. I was an anti-natalist and it didn't really make me more depressed. I was just more empathetic, to be honest. I just felt more for other people's suffering. The reason why I'm not an anti-natalist anymore will become clearer later in this tier list. So, C tier for anti-natalism. Maybe you don't care at all what happens to those around you. Maybe life is just all about obsessing over yourself. Narcissism. The belief of a narcissist is characterized by selfish and arrogant thinking, It involves a sense of entitlement and a need for admiration as a characterizing personality trait. Narcissists are like ogres, onions. What I try to say is that they have layers. The top layer is their self-obsession. Underneath, we have egotism. And then at the center of the onion, we have the hidden, deep insecurity they try to protect themselves from. A narcissist can't empathize because they can't really feel themselves. They would have to peel themselves off and then go through this deep process of mourning and crying because they actually feel very misplaced in the world. This way, they might actually break free from their narcissism. In my experience, arrogance is masked insecurity. If you know a narcissist, you know how deeply miserable they actually are. And it's because they feel alone, so they need the validation of others. It's a sad way to live. 80 for narcissism. A truly confident person might also sometimes appear arrogant, but you can recognize genuine self-love most of the time because they are compassionate. This is why the complete opposite of narcissism is altruism. Altruism is the unselfish concern for the welfare of others. It involves acting to promote someone else's well-being, even at a risk or cost to oneself. When was the last time you did something good to somebody else only because you wanted to help? Being less self-destructive seems to be the process of caring more about others. This becomes super obvious when you become a parent or when you serve a community. I also think that this is where capitalism shines, when a company really helps a community with an issue. We seem to be onto some odd truths about human nature. Maybe we connect with something deeper when we empathize. So if you want to self-destruct, be egotistical. F tier for altruism. But on a purely material basis, there's no objective reason to care about anybody. Scientific materialism. Scientific materialism refers to the idea that all phenomena can be explained through the laws of physics and chemistry, without the need for any supernatural explanations. 2 years ago, I used to think that I am just a lazy person, like that this is just how I am, like no ambitions, playing video games the entire day, and never like working out. I also slept like a schizoid, going to bed super high out of my mind, having smoked a ton of weeds at 5 in the morning, and I did this for months. And then I was there wondering what was the meaning of life. I discovered the Andrew Huberman podcast. It's a channel that explains through neuroscience how our brain chemistry controls our feelings and behaviors. And what I found is that when you treat your own body like the biological machine it is, there's often no need for philosophizing. I got stuck in my head trying to figure out the meaning of life, to get motivated somehow and get my shit together. But if your dopamine system is really fucked, it will take more than thinking yourself out of depression. But scientific materialism is just descriptive. It just says that everything is matter and this is how matter works. It doesn't really tell you anything about what you should be doing with your life or what meaning really is. So I will put it on D tier. You can know all facts, but you don't really have any reason to care. This is why the counterpart to scientific materialism is the classical belief in God. The belief in God is the conviction that the universe was created by a divine being with a higher purpose in mind, transcending individuals even after death. Throughout our human history, people have felt this connection with something deeper than themselves. And is it an evolutionary trick for survival, or are we connecting with some higher power? Here the conflict between mental health and truth starts to become very intense. Believing that life has inherent meaning because you are created in God's image, with intention and purpose towards a greater good. A good so blissful that it will even transcend you after your death is a goddamn compelling belief. I used to be a Christian when I was a kid, and to me, it didn't do me any good. Because I felt evil for questioning reality. I felt like I couldn't be authentically myself, because I needed to block out certain thoughts that didn't make sense to me, because I was afraid that if I questioned my religion, then I was going to hell. It was also socially very hard, because my family and the people in church wanted me to believe. But I found comfort in the atheist communities online, and through science and philosophical arguments, I started to lose the belief in God. In a way, I was really finding myself. But what I talked about now was my struggle with religion, not with the connection to God or a higher power. This connection has a good reason to be there for most humans. It really gives some spiritual and mental peace. This is why I will put the classical belief in God to D tier. The reason it's not F tier is because I also want to honor all of the fucking garbage and wars that are caused through religion. But I really learned how helpful the belief in God was many years after I lost it. I found ground and identity in science, But philosophically, I started to spiral into a deep abyss. Nihilism. Nihilism asserts that traditional values, moral systems, and religious beliefs lack any inherent meaning. It perceives the universe as an empty, vast, and uncaring place. The belief in God never was about a man in the sky watching me over. It was about feeling that life had meaning, that there are universal truths that guide us. And once this is seen as baseless through nihilism, I felt into a sense of deep cosmic loneliness. People who have always believed in God or never really mentally wrestled with the concept of nihilism probably can't understand what an earth-shattering feeling this is. You feel like the universe's emptiness speaking to you in its nothingness, and you feel just so alone. It puts the existential dread in you like nothing else. What most people don't know or don't understand about the philosopher Nietzsche, who popularized nihilism, is that he himself did not endorse nihilism as a desirable or positive worldview. He talked about how to become the Übermensch by creating your own values and beliefs, saying or making them as meaningful as any God-given one. But usually most people who are nihilists don't arrive at that. They just deconstruct all beliefs and then they can't find anything anymore except pure existential angst. So this is why I give A tier to nihilism. But the emptiness that nihilism points to is significant. It feels that it comes oddly close to some ultimate sense of truth. But we are not quite there yet. It will come all full circle soon, I promise. You might sense, like me, nihilist or not, that whatever reality is, something extremely absurd is going on. Absurdism. Absurdism embraces the lack of meaning in nihilism and finds wonder in the absurdity of life. Do you see this? These are cells replicating DNA inside your body. You have trillions of them doing this to you right now. This is a transistor. It is powering the technological device, or should I say, the portal with which you are watching me right now. Each little thing is as small as a bacteria, and humans have made this. My point is, what the fuck is going on? 8 billion humans are alive on this planet just right now. 20 quintillion animals. And no, I didn't just make this number up. And don't get me started on the number of atoms or planets in the galaxy. There are infinite things to explore, and the question about the meaning of life only gets asked when you're not immersed in the present. What I found is that the lack of meaning is just a lack of direction. This is why the process of moving towards a goal and appreciating the path is the antidote to nihilistic philosophies. Trust that somehow it has to be this way, and the existentialist can calm down. For this, it really helps to be aware of the present moment and to honor your suffering as the realest thing there is, to confront it with courage. This is the essence of what made Jordan Peterson so popular. I will call Jordan Peterson's philosophy Petersonianism now, so it is about this existential philosophy. I'm not talking politics here. Petersonianism is the belief in the objective moral good and the denial of nihilism, emphasizing the significance of narrative structure in understanding and embodying this goodness. It asserts that truth, God, and morality are all forms of the same ultimate truth. It's of course no wonder that in this materialistic, hedonistic, cynical, nihilistic, lonely society, that this is some relief to people. That people need this like as some sign of hope. Whenever we humans have these internal fights of good and evil, heaven or hell, they become almost impossible to deny. Even for a nihilist, it's hard to argue that torturing babies doesn't really matter. At least we don't act like it. Maybe if you're a psychopath, this comes very close to some idea of objective moral good. Something along the lines of unnecessary suffering is evil, point blank. Of course, whatever unnecessary means gets us into politics and a lot of subjective opinion, but at least this statement is like some objective ground I think we all can agree on. It gives us a sense of direction. I think this is what we try to express through stories and movies and series and shows and personal relationships. It's like Jesus getting unfairly nailed to the cross, or Simba losing Mufasa through betrayal. There's some truth in stories that really connects with something, and having a framework of good and evil really helps to get your act together. An honorable F tier for Petersonianism. So what actually is truth then? Well, this depends on your definition of truth.
So people say to me, do you believe in God? And I think, okay, there's a couple of mysteries in that question. What do you mean you? What do you mean believe? And what do you mean God? And you say as the questioner, well, we already know what all those things mean. No, if we're going to get down to the fundamental brass tacks, we don't really know what any of those things mean.
This sounds oddly postmodern to me. We are reaching a paradox. It is time we put into question all what I've said so far through subjectivism. Subjectivism is the philosophical position that reality is based on individual perception and experience, emphasizing the role of the subject or the individual in creating meaning. The question of what is objectivity kind of goes to the heart of the metaphysical truth seeker. Is the reality that I observe objectively real, or is it just a fabrication of my mind? And what even is the difference? A huge dose of subjectivity is just necessary to remain sane in this world. You sometimes just need to come to terms with the fact that many believe that The Last of Us 2 had a good ending. Most controversial take so far. I used to think that I'm living in my body and that the reality I was seeing in front of my eyes wasn't real reality, that it was just subjective. But then one day I made up this thought experiment that changed completely how I saw this. I imagined, what if there was an alien species outside the universe who could perceive objective reality exactly like it is? Then it occurred to me that it would have to include everything, including experiences. Because if it doesn't include experiences, it is missing a huge part of the picture. Then conscious experience becomes an objective phenomena. Because you aren't observing reality from outside reality, like you are directly embedded within it. It's like if you had a dream where you could fly. You could either say, no, it wasn't really real, I mean it was just a dream, but you could also say, yes, I experienced the sensation of flying. It was definitely a real experience. It's undeniable from the first person perspective. In this way, illusion and reality become the same idea. I found all of this extremely liberating, but also rather shocking, because now my first-hand experience really was meaningful, because it was just purely real. I couldn't deny it. B tier for subjectivism. When you start to play with the object-subject division, humans start to enter really trippy territory. Determinism. Determinism is the belief in fate. It's the philosophical concept that all events are determined by previously existing causes. When I was around 14 years old, I watched this PragerU video. It's a conservative politics channel. In this video they argued that you either believe in God or you have to be a determinist. Because if you take scientific materialism to its logical conclusion, you end up with no free will at all. And I remember this because the video was supposed to be an argument for God, because people usually find the idea of determinism just so intrinsically uncomfortable. But I considered it and I felt this is the only logical conclusion. I have no control. What the hell? But even in biblical scripture it says that the future is already written. It's not really an atheistic idea. This was a really deep psychological shift for me, and I wonder if anybody out there can relate. I felt very existential for a while. Like I really had a hard time to grapple with this. And then I told all my friends about my incredible revelation. Hey, did you know that you have no control over your life? But you can directly get conscious of this if you observe your decision-making process. You can't control what you will think next, neither what you will want next. It all arises on its own. We know that our brain runs basically on subconscious processes. Accepting determinism really helps, therefore, to be more at peace in the present moment. And it can also help you to be more compassionate towards others, to understand that their environment has shaped them to be who they are. It's also at the heart of Stoic philosophy, to not try to control what you can't, to accept what life throws at you, and to still keep trying to do your best. I think it can give a lot of mental peace. But if you don't have faith in some sort of goodness in nature, it can also feel very evil, like if you're doomed. But I look at determinism very different nowadays. There's no real difference to me anymore between free will and determinism. In a spiritual sense, everything is acting out of the universe's will. But you still have desires, you still have decisions to make. You want a heavenly and not a hellish life. Connecting with these desires is connecting with your sense of responsibility as a human. So, D tier for determinism. What is your perspective on fate? Is it a heavenly gift? Or are you doomed? Doomerism. Doomerism is a cultural attitude of hopelessness and pessimism. Doomers feel disillusioned with the world, convinced they lack the ability to enact positive change in their lives or society. It's characterized by a sense of nihilism and despair. Take Nietzsche's nihilism, but don't reconstruct your own meaning. Be always pessimistic through trained hopelessness. Obsess over the negative aspects of society more than your own well-being. Project your own failures as a sense of doom for humanity. Basically pick all the negative bits on this tier list and make them into your personality. Believe them to be true with all your soul. And now, add a feeling of chronic loneliness, and you get the king of self-destruction, the Doomer. I actually love this belief archetype. It is so easy to feel the vibe with him. He listens to good music too. Like it's just a vibe, man. This melancholy and just this darkness. At the end, I felt very identified. I used learned hopelessness and self-judgment so I could just surrender in my own misery. I used hedonism to forget all my pain. Determinism was used to avoid all sense of responsibility, and nihilism was an awesome way to justify my own cowardness. Losing hope is just the perfect way to self-destruct. And the crazy thing is that you believe that all of this is true. As it stands, the Doomer is definitely in S+ tier of awful belief structures. This tier list is close to its end now. The most important revelation comes next. This was the biggest project I've ever created. So if you would like to see more philosophical rants about the truth of the universe and how it can serve your well-being, then I'd be really happy if you subscribe. But for now, let's get into what actually lies at the core of what I've discovered. Let's destroy all belief systems once and for all. No self. No self is the idea that there is no localizable, permanent self to be found in the reality of experience. The sense of identity is understood as an illusion of the mind. No self isn't really a belief, but more a way of experiencing reality. The strongest way I've experienced no self is through an ego death on psychedelic drugs. This event has changed my entire perception of reality forever. Ego death feels like you're getting pulled outside of your body, as if your conscious experience and physical reality become one and the same thing. It's as if reality is witnessing without a doubt that it is absolutely real, and it is made out of the conscious experience in the present moment. But it's not a human experience anymore. There are no thoughts, there are no beliefs, there is no sense of identity, you don't know what time, what death or life is. Everything just has no one experiencing everything. It appears to be that the human mind just really convinces himself that he has control over things, and then it identifies, this is me, this is me, this is me. But if you really look, there's no you to be found. The argument against this is, of course, how do you know that this is real? Maybe your mind is tricking you. And of course, I don't want you to take my word for it. You also don't need to take drugs to find this out. You can notice right now how there's no localizable self in your experience. There are only sensations that come and go, and your mind is just trying to identify with things. Meditation and introspection is a much more responsible way to finding this out. If you really want to know truth, then I advise you to not get lost in beliefs. Concepts are a creation of the mind, and they move you away from what is actually happening. Look for how it really feels like to be in this moment, and see if you can find yourself. There is no belief here to be put on a tier list. It's self-destroyed. So what do you do with all your beliefs once you disappear? Nonduality. There's no fundamental distinction between things. Everything is ultimately interconnected as one unified entity. I thought I was actually going insane. A few days after my ego death, I looked my father into his eyes, and I felt like I was him. And this felt more true than anything I've ever felt before. It freaked me out so much because the feeling was that I'm like the only being in the universe and I experience all possible realities simultaneously. I knew that I messed with something very serious, and it took me a long time to integrate these experiences. It was extremely difficult, but I came out at the other side of it, and since then my sense of self has changed for the better. What I'm trying to say to you is that you watching this video right now, looking at me, and me experiencing talking to you, both experiences are equally real. The perception that there's some fundamental difference between your life and my life is the illusion. We are only in different bodies. We are just cosmic experience. And if this doesn't sound like I've completely lost my mind, what becomes even more shocking is that when you experience this sensation of selflessness without any resistance from the ego, you feel a universal love. And yeah, this is this hippie idea of all is one and made out of love. But the more I've dissolved the sense of self over my life, the happier I've become. A sciencey hypothesis to this is that what we call consciousness is like an infinite field, and being a living organism separates us from this infinite field into like a finite configuration that we then want to protect, so we identify with things. And if this is true, and consciousness is really what is fundamental about reality, then we have an entity here that's omniscient, all-powerful, and omnipresent. And this would be what you are. But this isn't a new idea, nor is it my idea. It's the idea of Spinoza's God or enlightenment in Buddhism. It's also, I think, the freedom that everybody desires when they yearn for love and connection. All beliefs at this point collapse into one. It's the emptiness sensed in nihilism and the fullness felt in God. It's the empathy in altruism and the hatred in narcissism. Nothing and everything, life and death, they all are one side of the same coin. I believe the more you connect with this truth, the happier you will be.
Today, a young man on acid realized that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration, that we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There is no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we're the imagination of ourselves.